to you from Cucuta, Colombia. I'm up on a rooftop. Okay, looks like we might. I'm going to have to step out of the wind a little bit because it's really windy. We don't have a fantastic connection up here. I hooked up the Starlink, but it has not connected yet, so we'll have to wait if it comes back up. Anyway, it shows that we're still going, so I'm going to keep talking, and hopefully this thing will pick up. So, Nicolas Maduro was in his home last night and was apparently not thinking the United States was about to do something, but he was. You have to understand. After I listened to President Trump's press conference a little while ago, and listened to the Chief of Staff, well, the Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Raisin Kane, the general that was in charge of the mission, and Pete Hegseth, all talking about it. What came out of that was some more details about this mission and how it went down. So it started about 10 p.m. last night. President Trump gave the go-ahead order at 10 p.m. The actual mission kicked off, like what we would call H hour, kicked off at about 2 a.m. local time, 1 a.m. On the east coast of America. Having some serious connectivity issues up here today. All right, let's see if that works. Okay. Now, try this again. I'm back. The Starlink is not connecting, and I haven't had time to mess with it and get it going, so I'm just on hotel Wi-Fi now, and hopefully that'll be a lot better. All right, so let's start back at the beginning. At about 10 p.m. last night, President Trump gave the go-ahead order for this snatch and grab mission to take Nicolas Maduro out of Venezuela. About 150 aircraft took part in the mission from more than 40 bases across the region. And we're talking everything from B-1 bombers, F-35 strike fighters, we're talking about F-22 Raptors, and all sorts of drones and all sorts of things like that. Then about 1 a.m. Eastern time or 2 a.m. local time, they started a multi-layered series of attacks on Venezuela. This is according to the press conference that was just given a couple hours ago. And that multi-layered attack included strikes on air defense assets and I would call feints to distract the forces of Venezuela from what was about to happen. Then a bunch of special operations helicopters flown by Task Force 160th came flying in from ships offshore with Delta Force operators on board. They came in and hit the house where Nicolas Maduro was staying. Now, this is what we've been told so far, but I'm going to extrapolate a little bit based on my own knowledge and my own understanding how these things work, having been in the 75th Ranger Regiment myself and having participated in missions like this. I can tell you that Delta Force is not just going to come land on the building and go inside and do their mission and then come back out unless they've got blocking forces all around the building. So it's likely that there were other troops in Rangers. It could have been SEALs, who knows. Rangers are typically, they're the ones who train for that mission. But they would have dropped on blocking positions all around that house and kept anybody else from coming in to assist. Now, apparently there were some pretty serious firefights, according to the president. And there were no American troops killed or injured. There was one helicopter that was struck by ground fire, but it remained flyable, and they were able to get it out and continue the mission with it. The Delta Force operators then went into the house where Nicolas Maduro was staying. Now, you have to understand the amount of intel that they must have to be able to do this. Okay, the amount of intelligence would be just orders of magnitude more than most countries even have the capability to collect. And it's probably beyond the reach of US intel capabilities unless we have somebody on the ground on the inside who's feeding us inside information about Nicolas Maduro's location in real time, what his disposition is, what kind of forces surround him, because that stuff can change on a dime. And so we reportedly had inside sources who may have seen that sweet $50 million reward staring him in the face. Now, apparently, nobody is going to collect that reward, according to a comment that was made by the Secretary of State. So, because he said something like, well, I guess we just saved $50 million, although it probably cost more than $50 million for the mission itself. So the way the mission went down, Delta Force landed, went inside the house, apparently surprised Maduro. Now, he has a safe room in that house that is very difficult, would be very difficult to get him out of. Not impossible. That's possibly true, but they nevertheless were able to surprise him, and to the point where they captured him just as he was trying to close the door of his safe room. Again, this is according to the press conference that President Trump gave. Now, President Trump, whenever he announces something like this, is very bombastic about it, and there's lots of superlatives, and this is the biggest and the greatest and the most wonderful, and the, you know, that kind of thing. And so when you're listening to these sound bites, you got to kind of sort through all that to try to figure out what actually happened. If you can't hear me, refresh your page, but then you wouldn't be able to hear me telling you to refresh. So somebody post in the comments that if you can't hear, just refresh the page and the audio should come back. Now, they were able to grab Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Delcy Rodriguez, I think is the, wait, Delcy is the vice president? Is that right? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I know people get mad if I mention anything about President Trump that's not just bootlicking, thank you, we love you. And, you know, let me just say this. I think this mission is one of the times when President Trump really got it right. And that's most likely due to the fact that he listened to the people who were giving him advice. Okay? Sometimes he doesn't listen to people who give him advice. Sometimes he just kind of does whatever he wants. But in this case, President Trump was listening to the people around him who knew what they were talking about, the military advisors he's got, and this thing went off without a hitch. Now, just imagine, I mean, they had likely thousands of troops that were involved in this mission, and probably 100 or so who were actually inside Venezuela's territory, maybe a couple dozen or more, maybe 100, to go on the ground, to be actually on the ground here, okay? So that we did put some boots on the ground in Venezuela. We did put them at risk, and kudos to President Trump for doing that. Because one thing that I've noticed in the last 25 years of doing this job is presidents and politicians very often are so worried about the political capital that they will lose if they get a U.S. troop killed that they don't want the troops to do anything. They do, and we saw this in Afghanistan, we saw it in Iraq, we've seen it in Syria, we've seen it in lots of places. And President Trump bucked that trend last night. And so As a former special operations soldier myself, I just want to say kudos to President Trump for listening to your advisors and for ordering this and letting them do it the way that they wanted to do it. Now, he says he was there watching the entire time, and he was amazed at the speed and efficiency of the U.S. Special Operations Forces that went in. And you would be, and because listen, if you don't know who Delta Force is, let me give you a little primer on that. The Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC, is made up of a bunch of different special operations units. And there's a difference between special forces and special operations forces. Special are the Green Berets. Their main job is to teach third country nationals and raise up military forces for those guys and help them fight for themselves. That's their main job. Now, they do lots of other things too, but that's their main job. Delta Force is another level higher than the special forces. They're actually a part of the Green Berets, but they were created to specialize in hostage rescue, pinpoint precision on the ground strikes, snatch and grab missions, things like that. And I know a lot of guys that are current or former Delta Force operators, and I've been around these guys my entire career. Some of the guys that I trained as privates went on to become Delta Force. And somebody says Delta Force is Tier 1. That's true, but there are lots of other Tier 1 units. Task Force 160th is Tier 1. The Rangers are Tier 1, or were Tier 1. I don't think they are anymore. And SEAL Team 6, Dev Group, those guys, they're also Tier 1. But Delta Force specializes in sending guys in on the ground to snatch a bad guy just like this. Now, if you've seen the movie Black Hawk Down, you have an idea of what this entails and how dangerous this kind of mission could be. Nicolas Maduro had lots of people surrounding him. He had lots of protection, and they had to fight those forces to get to Nicolas Maduro. To be able to do that and have no losses whatsoever is just astounding. It's really amazing that they were able to pull this off without any loss of life on the American side, or without any injuries even. So what they did is they went in and they snatched him out of his bedroom, got him before he got into his safe room. Then they put him on a helicopter. They flew him out to a ship. Now he is reportedly on the USS Iwo Jima, and is making his way to the United States with his wife. Some people ask why they got his wife as well. His wife has also been indicted. And so you need to think of this as not a military operation, but a law enforcement operation that was assisted by the military because it happened in another country. Obviously, the U.S. military very rarely is going to help a law enforcement operation in the United States because of the Posse Comitatus Act. But when you're talking about a law enforcement operation under Title 10 with the Drug Enforcement Administration in the lead, DEA, I've been out with those guys a lot. They very often are going to need to get plussed up by some special operators from the U.S. military. And this was a combined joint operation between not just different services. That would be a joint operation, between the Navy and the Air Force and the Army and the Marine Corps and the Coast Guard. And apparently there were members of all of those services represented, and even National Guardsmen who were involved in some way, according to the president. But a combined joint operation means we've also got the DEA, the CIA in the mix, working alongside the U.S. DEA forces and the military and all that, okay? So they're all connected. They all participated to get this done. The intelligence that told them where to find Nicolas Maduro and what he was doing and how many people were around him came from a human source on the ground. That's the kind of thing that's pretty hard to collect sometimes if you just rely on signals intelligence. Unfortunately, in the past 10 years or so, the United States had sort of gotten rid of a lot of its human intelligence collection capabilities and had relied far too much on signals intelligence, which is flying a drone overhead and trying to listen in on telephone conversations and internet chat rooms and stuff like that. Human intelligence is very dangerous. It's very dicey. You have to go into you'd have to go into Venezuela. You'd have to actually recruit spies, Venezuelans who are against the Maduro regime, but are inside the Maduro regime. So that is something that likely took years. According to Dan Kane, this operation, in the way that it went down, was actually something they've been training for months. So this is not just something that they say that they built a scale model mock-up of Nicolas Maduro's home, and they trained hitting that scale model mock-up to get it down faster and faster and faster and faster. I was a part of a mission like this during the first Gulf War back in 1991. There was, I don't know if you're old enough to recall, but the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait City was surrounded by Iraqi forces, and there were Americans that were inside basically being laid siege to by the Iraqis. And so we got called up to train for a mission to go into the embassy and to get them out. Now, I was a ranger, so I would not have gone inside the embassy. I would have been a part of a blocking force on the outside of the embassy. Like I said, that's what rangers do. They take up positions on street corners and stop all traffic and fight off any quick reaction force that's coming to try to save the day. And the Delta Force was going to go into the embassy, load up the Americans that were stuck there, and get them out. And we did exactly what they did for this mission. We first went out on the PT field by our barracks, and we laid out the building size of the embassy compound in engineer tape, with just white cloth engineer tape, and tacked it to the ground. And then we practiced and practiced and practiced how we would go. We would get off the helicopter here, we'd run over here, we'd take up a position, we would, hold off the enemy from this position, and then when we got this signal, we would pull back in, we'd get back on the helicopter, and we'd leave. Eventually, they built a plywood mock-up, scale model mock-up of the embassy down at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. And we went down there and we hit that thing over and over and over and over again, came in from the sea, because the actual embassy in Kuwait was right on the ocean front. And so it was even planned out down to that detail. And we actually went out and spent, I don't know, about a week on the USS Guadalcanal, flying missions every night. We'd get on a Black Hawk, we'd fly in, we'd hit the embassy mock-up, and we kept doing it and kept doing it and kept doing it till we just got it down to an art form. Then they built another scale model mock-up of the embassy at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. We went up there and we did a live fire iteration of the takedown of the embassy and the rescue of the hostages. So this live fire iteration, we're using live ammunition. The helicopters, little birds coming over our heads, we're shooting 2.75-inch rockets right over our heads and hitting in front of us. It was insane. And apparently the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and all those kinds of people came out to watch that go down. And we did the entire mission in like 6 minutes. And then we got the go-ahead to go do the mission. So then we got sent, they packaged everybody up and sent them over to the Gulf in preparation on another ship to go in and do the mission in Kuwait. And then, I don't know, somebody leaked the fact that we were about to do it. I think they actually tried to alert Congress, and somebody leaked it. And so the Iraqis just let the Americans go. They just went, okay, you guys can leave. And so we never had to do the mission. But that experience gives me an idea of what they did training for the mission that happened last night in Caracas. They built a scale model mock-up or two of the area, not just the house, but even the area around the house, with exact measurements of how wide the streets are, where the power lines go, where the enemy fighting positions are, et cetera, et cetera. And they plowed in there. They did it over and over and over again until they got it down, okay, and they went and did it for real last night. And that's why it went off without a hitch, because these guys are good, but they're good because they practice, 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 practice. They say that the average Delta Force operative fires more than 1 million rounds a year on the training range. I know one Delta Force guy who in his career fired more than 20 million rounds in training. These are some of the best pistol and rifle shots on planet Earth. I mean, there just are very few people that even have the ability to go through that much ammunition. I was out on the shooting range the other day, and I was just flabbergasted when I figured out that the rounds I was shooting, which is just 300 blackout, were more than $1 a piece. They used to be like 25 cents a piece. The price keeps going up on that stuff. So you can imagine if I wanted to fire 1 million rounds a year, it'd cost me like $1.2 million just in ammo for that weapon. They spend millions of dollars a year training these guys so that they are the best in the world. And they're fearless, and they want to do jobs like this. They want to take bad people out. That's the reason they join. That's the reason they give up whatever else they could have done with their lives to be a part of that. And it's frustrating to see politicians who don't want to allow them to do their job, who are too afraid to send them into harm's way when they're jumping up and down going, please send me into harm's way. That's what I signed up for. So kudos to President Trump for actually having the guts to pull this off. And kudos to all those guys who got it done in such a spectacular way. All right? Yeah, now I'm not giving away any kind of information that's not public knowledge, easily available on the internet out there. Just the fact that I'm telling you things that you haven't heard before is just because this is an arcane field. Your average journalist didn't spend 8 years in special operations and wouldn't be able to fill you in on things like this. But I'm certainly not going to give away things that are going to compromise operational security or any tactics, techniques, and procedures that are not publicly known, okay? So don't get your panties in a wad over that, all right? Now, let's talk about the reaction. Today in Venezuela, there were some protests in support of Nicolas Maduro. He has people that are supportive of him, and they went out in the streets, and I listened to some of that as I was on the plane getting ready to leave to come here. And they're a little demoralized, which is understandable. They weren't, just viciously angry. They were just saying, this is an attack on our country, and we need to stand up to America, and this is imperialism, and blah, 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 all the things that you heard Nicolas Maduro putting into their brain for the last couple of months. However, if you go just outside of Venezuela, which is where I am right now, I'm in Cúcuta, Colombia, right on the border. As a matter of fact, that's Venezuela right back there. And I'll be over there here shortly. I'm going to jump in a taxi and go out there pretty quick. But so the Venezuelans that are outside of Venezuela are ecstatic. They are ecstatic. And I can promise you, what they're telling me is that most people in Venezuela are ecstatic as well. Now, you're not seeing yet mass jubilant celebrations in the streets in Venezuela. Why? Because the Maduro regime has not actually fallen. See, they took out Alibaba and they left the 40 thieves. President Trump, in his remarks at the press conference today, gave not exactly an ultimatum, but let the rest of Nicolas Maduro's regime know, if you're in a high-ranking position in the regime, you should be packing your bags and leaving, because if you don't, we're going to come after you like we went after Nicolas Maduro. And I was told by a Venezuelan on the plane today, he had heard that lots of high-ranking officials are now on their way to this border behind me to leave and go into hiding or exile outside of their country. That's probably a smart thing to do, because once the regime does actually collapse, what we see in times like that is we see major fighting. It's going to be bloody. You know, there are a lot of people who have a lot of grievances against the government and anything that represents the government. Those people very often are going to go looking to take revenge on the people that have been persecuting them and oppressing them for so many years. So if you're in the police force, if you're in the military, if you're you know, any government official or anything, and you've had anything to do with Maduro, you might be wanting to leave right about now. Now, I'm told, actually I was told by a guy just right here at the hotel when I got here, that he heard that there are a lot of people coming out. But I'm also told, I mean, the plane that I was on from Panama was full of Venezuelans. It was absolutely full of Venezuelans. It was so full of Venezuelans that when we landed in Cucuta, somebody in the back of the plane shouted, "Venezuela libre!" You know, Venezuela is free. And the whole plane just went insane, clapping and cheering and yelling. It was kind of cool to be a part of. But this is something that most Venezuelans have been waiting for a long time. I've been hearing from a lot of my Venezuelan friends from the United States, from Panama and elsewhere today, sending me messages of just pure joy. They are so happy that it looks like they may be about to get their country back. Now, the president is gone. Not the president, he wasn't the president. Nicolas Maduro is gone. So is his wife. But the vice president has now taken control of the country, and she has called for a full mobilization, a complete mobilization of the Venezuelan armed forces and militias. That would represent something in the millions of people. Now, whether or not those people will actually respond to that is another question. Don't know. They might not. I know that the last time this happened, during Trump's first administration, when it looked like Maduro was about to fall, I came down here and there were hundreds or thousands even of Venezuelan soldiers who were coming across the border into Colombia, laying down their uniforms and defecting to Colombia. So much so that here in Cucuta, they had them sleeping in churches and hotels all over the place, okay? So I think, I mean, if I had to guess, that's likely what we're about to see. There's a good chance that we will see the regime actually fall apart. A lot of defections from the military and the police. And we might see some violence inside the country of Venezuela, as now there's a vacuum of power and various factions rush in to try to fill that vacuum of power. That's why it usually gets bloody when something like that happens. Now, there's a video that was put out. Now, I'm looking at WhatsApp group out of Venezuela that has videos and stuff on it out of Venezuela. I'm sorry, not WhatsApp, Telegram group. And it says that the Ayala 312 Armored Cavalry Battalion of the Venezuelan Army apparently suffered total destruction of all its equipment and most of its armored vehicles. I'm going to show you the video here. So it's a very short video, but it just shows some debris, likely from a strike of some sort, drone strike or what have you. Now, President Trump said in his press conference today that the United States is going to manage Venezuela until such a time as a new government can be instated. That is for the course. That's what we did in Panama when I invaded Panama back in 1989. We, invaded, we took over, we had troops on the ground, and we kept them there until Guillermo Endara took the presidency, and we were able to pull out and leave the Panamanians to govern themselves. The difference here is that we don't have any troops on the ground in Venezuela. So President Trump says we're going to manage Venezuela. That's one of those things, excuse me, where you might have to read between the lines a little bit. What I can see, or what I can imagine, are some of Trump's advisors over there going, oh, he didn't just say that. Oh, no. Because the United States is not in a posture militarily to take over Venezuela and govern Venezuela or even put in a new government until and unless the current regime actually collapses, which has not happened yet. Now, I'm told that I have to back up. The border right over here was not guarded by a lot of the Venezuelan military until just recently. And the reason for that is because the last time they sent the military to guard the border over here, we had hundreds of them rush across and defect. Didn't want to be in Venezuela anymore. I met some of those guys and talked to them. This time, apparently there are some Venezuelan National Guard or whatever on the border, but the border is really, up until just recently, being policed by what's called colectivos. The colectivos are basically, think of them as Venezuelan biker gangs. They're very brutal. They got very few scruples, but they're useful to President Maduro because they're loyal to him, and they're loyal to him because he gives them special cover so that they can rob, rape, pillage, and burn whatever inside Venezuela, and they can make good money doing it. So for a long time, the colectivos have been policing the comings and going across the border, and there weren't a lot of police or military there. What I'm told is that today, I'm going to go find out here in a minute, what I'm told today is that the colectivos are gone from the border. Up until yesterday, they were still there. As a matter of fact, my friend Oscar Blue was down there about a week ago, and they told him, hey, be careful because those colectivos are looking to kidnap Americans and take them back into Venezuela. Fortunately for Oscar, he's Mexican, not American, even though he reports for an American news outlet. But so apparently those guys are gone now. But again, I'll have to wait and see when I get down there here in just a little bit. So the Venezuelans, by and large, are very happy. The vice president, excuse me, hold on a minute. You get a drink of water here. The vice president's, her name is Delcy Rodriguez, again, is calling up full mobilization of the Venezuelan troops, militias, everything. It's not likely that they're going to try to shoot back, that they're going to actually try to attack American ships or anything like that. If they did, that would be a very bad day for them. That's what was said by Dan Kane in the press conference. President Trump says the United States is ready, willing, and able to perform a second strike. If they struck 100 targets in seven different locations during the first iteration last night, you better believe that they've got 1,000 more targets lined up, ready to strike if necessary. But they don't necessarily want to take out the entire Venezuelan military, because they want the new regime to be able to maintain control of the country once they take power. And since it's pretty well known that the Venezuelan military is not all that loyal to Nicolas Maduro, then there shouldn't be a real big reason to, for there to be a lot more fighting. So talking to the Venezuelans that I've been around today, they're saying, oh no, there's not going to be a big war. The Venezuelans are very happy with this. Even the ones that say they're not are very happy, and they're going to be even happier once they start to see the effects of getting rid of a dictator from your country. All right? Okay, folks, let me just mention that I report like this every day live over on my own channel, which is The Hot Zone with Chuck Holton here on YouTube. So if you've not watched me before, please go subscribe to The Hot Zone. I'm going to be live there later on tonight. I'm also going to be reporting on CBN some more over the next couple days. We'll see about whether or not I can actually get into Venezuela. I'm not actually planning to go into Venezuela right now until it settles down a little bit, because the current regime would love nothing more than to grab Chuck Holton and use him as a bargaining chip in whatever negotiations come next. One thing Delcy Rodriguez did say, as she was calling up the Guard and reserves and everybody inside Venezuela, is that she is open to discussions with the United States. And you can read that as, please don't take me out and arrest me as well. Let's talk and figure out how we can do this in a non-violent way. Okay, now there's one more thing I just wanted to point out. My friend Jacob Persley in Armenia, of all places, that he put out today that I think was a good point that we should make for the Christians that watch CBN. The Nicolas Maduro regime, there was an American pundit, Tucker Carlson, who tried to make the case that Venezuela is the most Christian nation in Latin America. They're very conservative. Well, that's all of Latin America. Most of Latin America, 90+% of Latin America is Catholic, and so they have Catholic values and things like that. Venezuela is not special in that regard. As a matter of fact, if anything, from my experience, Venezuelans are a little less religious than, say, Colombians or Panamanians. That's just my sense. That's not hard data. But there are a lot of indigenous tribes in Venezuela who live out in the jungle, in the Amazon, whatever. And there were lots of American missionaries that were going in there, bringing the good news of Jesus Christ to the people inside those unreached tribes inside Venezuela. They were translating the Bible into their language so they could have the Word of God in their own heart language. They were doing great work in there. And one day, Iran called Nicolas Maduro and said, or actually Hugo Chavez, and said, these American missionaries are spies. We want you to get rid of all of them. And they did. Venezuela and Iran are tightly linked. Oh, thank you. Celia Flores is the name of the president of Nicolas Maduro's wife. Yeah, I mixed her up with Delcy Rodriguez. They're very close with Iran. And so when the Iranians asked them to, they went in and kicked out all the American missionaries about what they call themselves. Most of them are English teachers or things like that. That's what they do in non-permissive environments. It sounds like Nicolas Maduro has just landed at Stewart International Airport in New York, in Orange County. I think that's near Newburgh, New York. I'm not sure. But Nicolas Maduro is on the plane that just landed, and they're waiting for him to get off. The waiting for the first images of Maduro's plane. So here's a video of his plane landing, right, coming in northern New York. The Nicaraguan government, which is pretty communist itself, issued a demand to the United States that they immediately release Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. I don't think that's going to fly. Can you see President Trump going, oh, well, you know, Nicaragua wants us to release him. I guess we have to release him, you know. I mean, yeah, Leslie, I agree with you on that. So the Nicolas Maduro is on a 757 that belongs to the U.S. Department of Justice, and they're about to land. They just landed in New York. So I'm going to end it there because I've got live broadcasts more to do later on that I got to go get ready for. But I just wanted to let you know, stay tuned to CBN. If you want to support the kind of journalism you see on CBN, please go to cbn.com and donate there. We're a donation-supported news agency, and so we can always use your support. Thank you very much for watching. And again, I'll be over on my own channel, The Hot Zone with Chuck Holton, later on tonight with further updates. And I'll be hopefully right down at the border with the Starlink if I can get that thing working. Okay? Thank you very much for watching. God bless you. We'll see you next time.